If you're someone that's constantly confused in class, asking your friends all the time about what just happened, and you spend hours trying to figure out a concept at home, then this video is for you. My name is Daniel, and I help students get better grades without sacrificing all their time. Now, when you get into high school, it's going to get a lot harder, especially if you're going to grade 11 and 12 in the senior years where the concepts just become a lot more advanced and the workload is higher as well. So this is a video on how exactly you can learn more efficiently and effectively so that you don't have to start wasting time reviewing and constantly trying to learn or relearn concepts that you covered in class. Now, does this mean that it's going to work every single time? No. Sometimes there are certain things that you just can't pick up in class, and that's okay. It's a testament to your skill level at the moment, and that's why we work on those things. So, let's begin. And the first thing I want to cover is the difference between hearing and learning. Now, hearing means that information passes through one ear and goes out the other ear, and most of the time it just stimulates your head and you just forget it soon. For example, let's say I'm talking to a friend and I say, "Yo, Jerry, did you hear Jerry just got a new girlfriend? Oh, shoot." And then two weeks later, you're probably not going to remember that shit anyways. Now, learning is different. Learning is absorbing the information which changes your understanding, beliefs, or behavior. I don't want to get too technical here, but basically, it means you're able to recall and apply the information that you learned from before, and usually lasts longer than if you were just hear it. So now that we understand the difference between learning and hearing, let's dive into how you can become better at learning. And so, a lot of the times, when you're looking at concepts, the hardest ones are usually 3D concepts, right? And just for reference, 3D and 2D concepts are different. 2D concepts is just the thing at face value. For example, how to add two numbers. That's a 2D concept because there's nothing behind it. Versus something like a 3D concept like factoring, where you have to know several other concepts to be able to fix or to be able to perform this one big concept. So that's just a math example, but you can do lots of different things. And I'll give you some examples later on. But for now, this is what I usually do to really get down a concept that I might not be familiar with. So for anyone out there, no matter how smart you are, I think you should always be taking notes, because for whatever reason, maybe maybe you stayed up late last night, or you're not feeling it that day. For whatever reason, you might miss information. And taking notes always helps, because writing down information helps you memorize it 70% better than listening or writing it down online on a computer, typing it out. And I don't know if it's 70%, but I know it's a significantly higher margin. But yeah, just try to write everything down, record the information so that one, you memorize it better, and two, if you ever forget, you can always look back on it. And I know some people are going to be saying, "Oh, but the teacher always posts it online." The problem is with looking at it online, maybe for me personally, it's really hard to look online or look at information online and remember it. But if it works for you, it works for you. But I definitely do suggest writing it out, because like I said, there's scientific studies that show that if you write it out, there is a higher probability that you will memorize it more effectively. And so that's the first step, right? Just write down the information. The second step is some weird strategy that some people call decomposition. I don't really care what you call it, I just do it. So you just take the concepts and you break them down into smaller topics. All right, so let's go back to our previous example, which is factoring. Now, with factoring, you need to know several concepts. You need to know how to add, divide, subtract, multiply. You need to know BEDMAS, you need to know exponents, right? And so there's a bunch of different concepts here. And so for someone who's trying to look at it at face value, it's going to be very overwhelming, right? And so what you do is you want to break those concepts down into specific topics each. So for example, adding, subtracting, multiplication, division, right? And then so you're like, okay, this is how to add. Whoa. All right, and it's a lot more digestible. Is my point. And this might sound obvious to you, but yeah, I think a lot of people could benefit from this strategy, anyways. And so once you've broken down that concept into specific topics, you now try to understand the topic by either defining them with an analogy, a metaphor, an abbreviation. For those who don't know what those mean, I'll explain in a second. And you want to clearly identify their relationship with the main topic. Okay, so back to the abbreviation and metaphor thing. So abbreviations, for those who don't know what that means, is basically just a really short word that's supposed to mean a phrase. For example, LOL is laugh out loud. LOL would be an abbreviation, right? It's like the first letter of each word put into one word. And I'll give you another example, BRB, which is be right back, right? So that's an abbreviation right there. And you can apply it to whatever you're learning as well. If it's a sequence, then it would be a lot easier. Now, another one is metaphors or connections, right? So you can say that, like let's just use adding, for example, because it's a very, very simple example. Let's say, I don't really get the point of adding two numbers together. Well, you can say, okay, look, it's like putting two things in a basket, right? Right now, the basket has 0 things, and if you take one thing and put it in the basket, and you take the other thing and put it in the basket, how many things do you have inside, right? That's sort of like a metaphor or a connection to something else that's more digestible or understandable. And so once you understand the mini topic, once you understand the mini topics, then you need to connect them back to the main idea, which in our case is factoring. So let's say I fully understand how to do addition now. Okay, how do we use addition and factoring? Well, if you want to be able to group the numbers together and there happens to be an addition sign, then we need to use addition. And I'll give you a better example later on. It's just that right now I'm trying to get through the idea and use very basic examples. And so now that you understand that the general process, all that's really left to do is just to memorize the concept, right? Because sometimes, even if you wrote all the concepts down and you broke them into topics and you understand the topics, you relate the topics back to the concept, you still might not remember it. And that's the memorization factor. And if your learning skills aren't very strong, then you might have to rewrite or recite this process a couple of times. But if you're already someone who has solid learning skills, then you can probably do this all in just the first try by just writing everything down, including the process that I just showed you. So not just writing the information, but writing out the concepts and the small topics themselves and how they relate to the main idea. And it sounds like a very long process, but remember, once you get this stuff down, you probably won't forget about it in a very long time. Unless you don't use the information forever, of course, but that's a different story. And so now that I've explained to you the process, I just want to give you a couple of examples that might help you. So the first one is writing. Now, I know for a lot of people, writing is extremely hard and English is extremely hard in general. So I'll break this down. For example, there are several different topics when you start writing, and more specifically, writing paragraphs, right? Because why else would you be writing anything else in high school? So to write a paragraph, sometimes you need hooks, right? To gauge the reader's attention. You might also want transitions, connections, grammar, conclusions. So you'll notice that a lot of these things are very big topics in and of themselves, but they are subtopics when it comes to grammar. And so for these examples, it's hard to just define them because we're not here to define, for example, hooks, right? We know what a hook is, but then how do we understand a hook? How do we make our hooks good? Well, see, that's the part where you have to look at other people's hooks. You have to look at good examples and you'd be like, okay, so a good hook is comprised of this, this, and this. Okay. And so in the process I just showed you, sometimes defining something or defining a term isn't what you guys really need or isn't applicable to the subject that you're talking about. For example, I could say that, in science, I can talk about terms and, what they do and all that. But then if we're talking about writing and, writing hooks and conclusions and grammar, these are more like skills. Not only do you need to practice them, but in the context of our process right now, the best way would be to look at very good examples and just jot down a couple of characteristics or patterns you see from all those examples that you can translate into your own version of that skill. For example, if I've seen that there's a lot of good transition words, I'll use those transition words in my own writing. If I see that this conclusion is very nice and I see a lot of conclusions use this phrase at the very end, maybe I'll use that phrase at the very end, right? So I just hope that that clarifies a couple of things. And if there are more examples that you want me to go over, or maybe if there's a specific example that applies to you that you are not really sure about, then just let me know in the comments. And if you'd like, I'm offering one-to-one help for free to students who are looking to improve their grades or struggling to learn something. All you need to do is hit up my email down below in the description. And remember, nothing I say in this video matters unless you do something about it. So go do something about it.